I often find myself seated cross-legged on the worn Persian rug of my living room floor, a familiar tableau of Friday night. Around me, the physical manifestations of other people's needs pile up, a scattering of tenant maintenance requests, each scribbled note a small plea for stability. Mrs. Peterson, whose laugh lines deepen when she talks about her grandchildren, urgently needs her leaky faucet mended before the weekend becomes a symphony of drips. The Johnsons, a kind couple on the third floor, have reported a disturbing cacophony from their heater, a sound they described as a dying robot trying to sing. And then there's Mr. Garcia, meticulously polite, seeking official permission to install a ceiling fan, a small luxury in his meticulously kept apartment. This, then, is the ritual of my Friday night, diligently sifting through the minor domestic dramas of others, my only companion a lukewarm mug of forgotten coffee. The sudden, insistent chime of the doorbell slices through the quiet hum of my building. I glance at my watch, it's precisely 7:15 p.m. An unusual hour. In my world, visitors call first, especially on a Friday evening, when most people are either winding down or just starting their weekend revelries. When I pull open the door, my sister, Valerie, stands on my threshold. Her smile, a perfect, practiced curve of her lips, doesn't quite reach her eyes, which hold a cool, appraising glint. The camel-colored cashmere coat draped elegantly over her shoulders, I realize with a pang, likely costs more than 3 months of my modest rent. Miranda, she says, her voice bright and brittle, like the delicate shatter of breaking glass. The sound is almost an accusation in its forced cheerfulness. May I come in? Before I can even formulate a response, she glides past me, a faint, expensive scent of jasmine and ambition trailing in her wake. Her designer heels click with an almost aggressive confidence against the scuffed hardwood floors of my apartment, a sharp counterpoint to the quiet comfort of my home. She pauses, her gaze sweeping across my living room, the overflowing stack of maintenance requests, a testament to my dedication, the half-empty coffee mug, a symbol of my solitary work, and the deeply loved, slightly faded couch adorned with the throw blanket Grandma Eleanor had painstakingly crocheted for me years ago. Each item feels suddenly exposed, scrutinized under her sharp, unforgiving eye. Working on a Friday night, Miranda? You always were the dedicated one, she remarks, her tone laden with an inflection that twists the words into something more like an indictment than a compliment, stripping them of any genuine warmth. With a fluid motion, she retrieves a crisp, thick envelope from her sleek leather portfolio, its subtle, expensive sheen reflecting the overhead light. I came to deliver this personally, she states, her voice formal, as a courtesy. The paper feels unusually heavy in my hands, its weight almost ominous. I tear open the seal, my eyes scanning the contents, darting across figures that can't possibly be right, a cascade of impossible numbers. This is a rent increase notice, I finally manage, my voice hollow with disbelief. From $2,350 to $7,100? You can't be serious. I've lived here for 5 years, Valerie. The words hang in the air, a desperate plea for reason. Fair market value, little sister. Business is business, Valerie replies, completely unmoved by my shock. She casually adjusts the gleaming gold Cartier watch on her wrist, its expensive face catching the light like a small, dazzling sun. The family voted last weekend. We're repositioning all the properties for maximum return. My mind, stunned, rewinds to last weekend. The Sunday roast at Mom and Dad's, a memory I'd thought innocuous. You really should come to more family gatherings, Miranda, she adds with a dismissive shrug, as if my absence was a trivial oversight, not a carefully cultivated distance. Important decisions get made. The memory surfaces then, sharp and sudden, like a drowning victim gasping for air. 14 relatives, the entire extended clan, gathered around my parents' grand dining room table, laden with crystal and silver. When I had, quite innocently, mentioned Riverside Apartments, everyone's eyes had subtly, uniformly slid away from mine. Mom had abruptly changed the subject, her voice a little too bright, while Dad, oblivious or perhaps complicit, had merely refilled wine glasses with a clinking precision. My cousins, usually so boisterous, had exchanged quick, knowing glances that now, in retrospect, screamed betrayal. They had already decided. They had already known. My pulse quickens, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, and my mouth is suddenly desert dry. My hands tremble, a barely perceptible tremor, as I carefully refold the brutal notice. When they let her crush me in silence, they never imagined that silence would become my weapon, I think, the words forming somewhere deep in my mind, a place where fear, for now, hasn't quite reached. It's a chilling thought, a seed of defiance. You can't be serious, I repeat, my voice, to my own surprise, steadier than I feel, imbued with a quiet resolve. I've managed this building since Grandma Eleanor died. I've kept the tenants happy, handled countless repairs, and meticulously collected every rent check. For which the family has compensated you, Miranda, Valerie counters, her voice a cool blade of logic. But sentiment, I'm afraid, doesn't pay dividends. She makes the word sentiment sound like a weakness, a childish indulgence. An old memory, sharp as glass, surfaces, Christmas morning when I was 12. Valerie had unwrapped a lustrous pearl necklace, its iridescence catching the tree lights, while I received a slightly too large, clearance rack sweater from the discount store. My parents, beaming with pride at Valerie, had barely glanced at my gift, their attention wholly fixed on their dazzling eldest. Your sister knows what she wants in life, they'd explained later, almost apologetically, as if it were a virtue I lacked. She's looking out for the family's interests. That phrase, family's interests, had always seemed to exclude me. Grandma Eleanor had pulled me aside that same day, her hand a warm, comforting presence on mine. Your sister seeks power, Miranda, she had whispered, her wise eyes seeing far beyond the shimmering gifts. You seek connection. Remember which one builds a legacy. Her words, then a cryptic comfort, now resonated with startling clarity. I study Valerie now, taking in the details, her expensive watch, a precise instrument of time and status, her impeccably manicured nails, each perfectly shaped, the subtle, discreet logo on her leather portfolio that, I suddenly realize, matches the one on her law firm's letterhead. The timing of everything clicks in my analytical brain, a chilling revelation. 3 weeks after her firm lost the high-profile Westridge case, a significant blow to her professional prestige. 2 months after she purchased that sprawling new house in Oakwood Hills, a clear indicator of financial ambition. Part of me, a small, wounded part, wants to beg, to remind her of our shared childhood, of scraped knees and whispered secrets. Another, stronger part knows, with absolute certainty, that it would be utterly pointless. I'll need to review this with my attorney before responding, I say, surprising even myself with the firmness and unexpected authority in my voice. It's not a question, but a statement of intent. Valerie laughs, the sound sharp enough to cut, devoid of any genuine humor. What attorney would waste time on this, Miranda? The building's legally mine. The transfer papers were signed last month. Her words are delivered with a casual cruelty that takes my breath away. My stomach plummets, a sickening lurch. This isn't just about my apartment, my personal space. It's about my home, the only place I've truly felt anchored since Grandma Eleanor died. It's about my dignity, so casually dismissed. It's about my last tangible connection to Grandma. But more profoundly, it's about Mrs. Simmons in 2B, who lives frugally on Social Security and bakes the most exquisite Christmas cookies for everyone in the building. It's about Mr. Peterson, who's been here for 40 years and knows every creaking floorboard by name, a living historian of Riverside. Mom and Dad know about this? I ask, the question a formality, for I already know the devastating answer. Of course, Valerie says, checking her watch again, a subtle signal that my time, and hers, is running out. Your sister manages all the family assets. She then mimics our father's authoritative tone, a startlingly accurate impersonation. She knows what she's doing. The smile that spreads across her face isn't about money or business. It's about winning, about power, about finally, completely removing me from Grandma Eleanor's legacy, about erasing my very presence. Just then, my phone buzzes. A text message from Mrs. Simmons. Come down for tea, dear. You look upset. I saw Valerie arrive. The old woman, who has lived in the building for 40 years, who was Grandma Eleanor's best friend long before she became mine, sees everything from her window overlooking the front entrance. Her unwavering presence, even through a text, is a small anchor in the storm. Valerie notices the message on my screen. The tenants aren't your concern anymore, Miranda, she says, already gathering her portfolio, the dismissal clear in her voice. I'll handle communications going forward. Mrs. Simmons has lived here since before we were born, I reply, a futile defense of a deeply ingrained connection. Grandfather clauses are for sentimental fools, Valerie retorts, her voice laced with disdain. The market doesn't care about Christmas cookies and rent that's decades below value. Just then, as if summoned by the very mention of her name, Mrs. Simmons appears in my doorway. Her silver hair is neatly pinned back, glinting in the soft light, and she wears her usual sensible cardigan and sturdy shoes. She carries her favorite floral teapot on a small tray, the steam rising gently from its spout. I thought we could all use some chamomile, she says, her voice calm and firm, not waiting for an invitation to enter. At 72, with decades of wisdom and a formidable spirit, she has earned the right to ignore certain social norms, especially when they clash with her sense of propriety. Valerie's dismissive glance, intended to brush off the older woman, seems to bounce off Mrs. Simmons like rain off a windshield, leaving her utterly unaffected. Mrs. Simmons, Valerie says, her voice suddenly, unnervingly polite, a practiced veneer. We were just discussing some business matters. I heard, Mrs. Simmons replies, her gaze steady and knowing as she sets down her tea tray on my small coffee table. She straightens her spine to her full, respectable 5'2" height, her presence commanding. I knew your grandmother for 50 years, Valerie. What, I wonder, would Eleanor say about this? For a fleeting moment, Valerie's perfect mask slips. A flicker of something unreadable annoyance? Surprise? Crosses her face. Then, with an almost imperceptible effort, she recovers, smooths her expensive coat, and moves swiftly towards the door. 30 days notice, Miranda. It's all perfectly legal. When the door closes behind her with a soft click, the silence that follows is heavy, yet somehow cleansed. Mrs. Simmons pours steaming tea into 2 delicate cups with steady, unhurried hands. Some battles need preparation, not immediate confrontation, she says, her voice soft but resonant with years of experience, as she hands me a warm, fragrant cup. Eleanor faced vultures like this her whole life. She taught me how to handle them. The chamomile's gentle, earthy aroma grounds me, its warmth a soothing balm against the chill left by Valerie's departure, slowing my racing heart. A thought, nascent at first, begins to form, crystallizing from the fog of shock and anger that had enveloped me. I need to check Grandma's old papers, I say, the words a quiet revelation. Mrs. Simmons smiles, a knowing, almost fierce gleam in her eyes. I was hoping you'd say that. I stare at the worn cardboard box now sitting on my living room floor, a repository of a lifetime. My throat feels tight with a complex mix of lingering grief for Eleanor and a burgeoning sense of anticipation for what secrets it might hold. 2 days after Valerie's bombshell had exploded in my living room, the immediate shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, resolute determination. I finally gathered the courage to retrieve Grandma Eleanor's financial records from my seldom-visited storage unit. The air in the small space was thick with the scent of forgotten things and faint mildew. As I lifted the first folder, dust motes danced like tiny conspirators in the single sunbeam cutting across the dim room. The pages inside, initially daunting, began to tell a story I had never imagined, a narrative far more intricate and insidious than I could have conceived, meticulously kept bank statements, official-looking property deeds, and even carefully printed email exchanges. Each document, as I turned it over, revealed another disquieting piece of Valerie's systematic dismantling of Eleanor's carefully built legacy. An email, originating from Valerie and addressed to a prominent luxury development firm, caught my eye, its subject line a stark, chilling pronouncement. "Once we secure full control of Riverside," it read, "we can begin converting to high-end condos. Initial estimates suggest 300% return on investment within 18 months. My hands began to shake uncontrollably, the paper trembling. The date on the email was etched into my memory, a mere 2 weeks after Eleanor's funeral, a time when I was still numb with grief. Another folder contained minutes from a family trust meeting held 6 years ago. Valerie, with her persuasive eloquence, had convinced our parents to sell the beloved lake house, the very one Eleanor had specifically mentioned, in a quiet, wistful moment, wanting me to have someday. Market conditions favor immediate liquidation, Valerie had argued, her words carefully chosen, economically sound. My parents, ever susceptible to her confident assertions, had agreed without hesitation. For the family's financial security, Dad had explained, his voice vaguely defensive, when I'd questioned the decision, even then sensing something was amiss. The same justification, for the family's financial security, now echoed like a hollow mantra through document after document, the surprisingly small inheritance my cousin Thomas received instead of the antique shop Eleanor had promised him, the charming vacation property in Maine that had mysteriously disappeared into a labyrinth of family investments. Even the retirement fund contributions for longtime family employees, once so diligently managed by Eleanor, had been restructured and absorbed into company expansion under Valerie's direct supervision. A soft knock interrupted my grim excavation. Mrs. Simmons entered, carrying a small, welcome tray with an assortment of delicate sandwiches and a fresh pot of tea. Her eyes widened slightly at the sheer volume of papers that now entirely surrounded me, transforming my living room into a makeshift war room. "I found rental increase notices for all the senior tenants," I said, my voice hollow, raw with disgust. "She's targeting everyone, not just me. Mr. Peterson's rent would jump to $5,800. Mrs. Daniels, who's on a fixed income, to $6,450. The numbers were obscene, a cruel weaponization of affordability. "Don't worry about me, dear Mrs. Simmons said, her voice firm, as she gently set down the tray. "What else have you found in that treasure trove?" I held up a single, handwritten note, its paper yellowed with age, but Eleanor's distinctive, elegant script still clear and resolute. "Riverside must remain in the family," it read. "The legacy must be protected." The paper felt surprisingly warm in my hands, like a direct message from beyond the grave, a tangible link to Eleanor's enduring spirit. "She knew," I whispered, the realization a punch to the gut. "She knew what Valerie would try to do." While Mrs. Simmons calmly poured the tea, her movements a comforting presence amidst the chaos of documents, I continued sorting through the folders. A clear, chilling pattern began to emerge, Valerie positioning herself, subtly, meticulously, even before Eleanor's illness had truly taken hold. Small, seemingly innocuous transfers of funds, minor revisions to legal documents, quiet consolidation of authority, all while everyone else, myself included, looked the other way, trusting. "Your grandmother was no fool, Miranda," Mrs. Simmons said, handing me a steaming cup, her gaze unwavering. "She watched Valerie for years." The realization hit me then, a physical blow that left me breathless. Eleanor wasn't just being kind or seeking help when she asked me to assist with her financial records during her final months. She was preparing me. Training me. The weekends spent meticulously reviewing property maintenance costs, the long afternoons learning about tax assessments and zoning laws. She was, with quiet foresight, arming me for this very moment, forging me into a guardian of her legacy. I slumped back against the couch, my worldview tilting violently on its axis. My parents had never truly seen me as Valerie's equal, had they? Mrs. Simmons' gentle, knowing silence was answer enough. It was a truth I had long suppressed, but now it stood undeniable. Every family gathering, every memory, now played differently in my mind, re-edited with a newfound, painful clarity. The Christmas dinners where my hopeful law school application was casually dismissed while Valerie's eventual firm partnership warranted a celebratory toast. The summer barbecues where my property management certification earned a fleeting nod while Valerie's smallest court victory earned expensive champagne. The Thanksgiving when I proudly announced my promotion to building manager, and Mom, with lightning speed, changed the subject to Valerie's new Mercedes. "I've been so blind," I whispered, the confession raw. "Not blind, dear, Mrs. Simmons corrected gently, her hand reaching out to pat mine. "Just trusting. There's a crucial difference." I sat up straighter, the new knowledge hardening my resolve. Methodically, I began sorting the papers into new piles, no longer chronological, but strategic evidence of potential financial misconduct, documentation of tenant mistreatment, irrefutable records of property ownership and legal transfer. "She always waits until people are vulnerable," I said, recognizing the insidious pattern in Valerie's impeccable timing. "She struck after Eleanor's death, after Thomas's difficult divorce, after the Petersons' overwhelming medical bills." Mrs. Simmons nodded, her expression grim. "Predators target the wounded, Miranda. But being a lawyer doesn't make her invincible," I continued, my thoughts crystallizing, a steely conviction replacing the earlier despair. "It just means I need to be more prepared." My phone rang, a jarring intrusion. Valerie's name flashed on the screen, a stark red warning. I answered, putting her on speaker for Carver to hear. "You have a week to decide," she said without preamble, her voice as sharp and unyielding as ever. "I'm being generous in giving you notice at all. The market won't wait for your sentimentality." "I'll need more time to review everything," I replied, my voice, miraculously, steadier than I felt, imbued with a quiet defiance. "There's nothing to review," she snapped, her impatience palpable. "The decision is made. Mom and Dad agree." Almost on cue, my phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. "Your sister has carried this family financially for years, Miranda. We owe her." The message twisted the knife, confirming Valerie's manipulation. After ending the call, I noticed a crucial legal brief in one of the folders, a high-profile case Valerie's firm had conspicuously lost just last month. Another folder contained bank notices showing mortgage extension requests on Valerie's extravagant new house in Oakwood Hills, credit card statements revealing mounting balances, and partnership meeting minutes noting increasing pressure for her to bring in more revenue. This isn't just greed, I realized aloud, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. She's desperate. Mrs. Simmons peered at the incriminating documents, her brow furrowed. "Which makes her dangerous, Miranda." A final, terse text from my father confirmed my suspicions and Valerie's urgent timeline, family gathering next Sunday to finalize arrangements. "Be there." "A week," I murmured, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "She's giving me a week before the guillotine falls." Mrs. Simmons stood suddenly, her resolve radiating outward. "You need Lawrence Carver," she announced, her voice firm. "Who?" I asked, bewildered. "Eleanor's attorney." "Not the family firm, dear, her personal lawyer." Mrs. Simmons reached for her phone, her fingers nimble. "He retired last year, but he still consults. Eleanor always said he was the only attorney she trusted completely, the only one who truly understood her vision." While Mrs. Simmons made the call, her voice a low murmur, I continued to organize the documents, a flurry of purposeful activity. The financial records meticulously outlined years of transactions, the statements from long-term tenants detailed Eleanor's whispered promises regarding their housing security, and the maintenance records, which I had kept meticulously since taking over management, became a damning indictment of Valerie's neglect. By the time Mrs. Simmons returned, her call concluded, I had filled 3 separate boxes with neatly organized evidence, a veritable arsenal. "Lawrence will see us tomorrow morning," she announced, a triumphant note in her voice. "He says he's been expecting our call." Expecting it? I echoed, the word a bewildered whisper. Mrs. Simmons simply pointed to a sealed envelope I hadn't opened yet, sitting innocently amidst the stacks of papers. The handwriting on the front, Eleanor's familiar, elegant script, read, "For Miranda, when the time comes." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet of paper. Again, Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. "When the time comes, Lawrence has everything you need. Remember what I told you. Your sister seeks power. You seek connection, and connection will always outlast power." For the first time in 3 days, I felt something beyond the raw edge of shock and anger. A quiet certainty settled deep in my chest, a foundation forming. "This isn't about feelings anymore," I said, closing the file folder with a decisive snap. "It's about facts." Mrs. Simmons smiled, a fierce, almost predatory gleam in her eyes, a reflection of Eleanor's own spirit. "Eleanor would be proud, dear. Tomorrow we meet Lawrence Carver. Tomorrow, we will begin to fight back." On Monday afternoon, the air in Lawrence Carver's wood-paneled office felt thick with history and unspoken truths. I sat in one of his deep leather armchairs, my gaze fixed on the array of documents spread across his massive mahogany desk. Afternoon light, filtered through ancient Venetian blinds, slanted across the room, casting stark prison bar shadows across papers that had, in the space of mere minutes, utterly transformed my entire understanding of the last 3 years of my life. "Say it again," I whispered, my voice barely audible, my fingers tracing the ornate, embossed seal on what appeared to be a deed, its reality almost too profound to grasp. Carver adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his weathered face kind but utterly serious, his gaze steady. "Your grandmother, Eleanor Wells, left you $920,000 in a private trust 3 years ago. With that money, you formed Stonebridge Holdings LLC with my assistance, of course. Stonebridge then, acting as its legal entity, purchased Riverside Apartments from the family trust." I picked up the mortgage papers, feeling a dizzying sense of unreality. My own signature, clear and undeniable, stared back at me. A hazy memory surfaced, Grandma Eleanor, her eyes bright and focused even as her health began to wane, asking me to sign some contingency paperwork for the building, a safeguard, she'd said. I had trusted her implicitly, never questioning her motives, never asking why. "But Valerie," I stammered, "the pieces not quite fitting. Valerie has been collecting rent, handling everything for years. She acts like she owns the building." Carver's eyes twinkled with something that was a mixture of amusement and deep, quiet vindication. "Miss Wells Harrison, it seems, never bothered to verify the ownership transfer after your grandmother's passing. She simply assumed control, relying on her perceived authority and the family's acquiescence." The realization washed over me in dizzying waves, a tidal current of understanding. "So all this time," I breathed, the implication settling in my bones, "I've been the actual owner?" "Precisely, Miranda. Your grandmother made you manager of Stonebridge Holdings. You've legally owned Riverside Apartments for 3 years, while your sister has merely been an unauthorized property manager, operating under a mistaken assumption." A laugh, raw and a little disbelieving, bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, surprising us both. It was a laugh of disbelief, of sudden, exhilarating freedom. "Grandma Eleanor," I choked out, a fresh wave of emotion sweeping over me, "she planned this all along, didn't she?" "She was quite strategic, Miranda," Carver confirmed, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips as he slid a thick, sealed envelope across the polished desk toward me. "Eleanor left this for when the time came. She always knew the time would come." The envelope contained a single sheet of paper, fragile with age, but Eleanor's elegant handwriting was still perfectly legible. "Don't chase her approval. Build your own ground." My heart pounded against my ribs, a triumphant drumbeat, as the full weight of her message, and her trust, crystallized within me. This wasn't just ammunition for a legal battle. It was a foundation, a blueprint for my entire life. "Valerie scheduled a family meeting for Sunday evening," I said, gathering the documents, their significance now transformed. She's planning to evict tenants for being late on rent to clear them out. Carver checked his watch, his expression firm. Then I believe, he said, his voice imbued with a quiet power, we have a meeting to attend. And a lot of planning to do between now and then. The week that followed was a blur of intense preparation for the inevitable confrontation. With the steadfast support of Lawrence Carver and the unwavering strength of Mrs. Simmons, I would not just protect, but assert, my grandma's and now my own legacy. On Sunday, the dining room of my parents' Tudor-style home felt suffocating, its opulent grandeur now laden with an almost unbearable tension. 14 relatives, a silent jury, sat rigidly around the glossy antique table that had witnessed decades of family announcements, celebrations, and, I now realized, quiet betrayals. Crystal glasses, polished to a dazzling gleam, caught the chandelier's light, while mothers prized silver serving dishes, heavy with unspoken expectations, gleamed menacingly on the sideboard. Valerie stood at the head of the table, an imperious figure, legal documents arranged before her like an arsenal of meticulously sharpened weapons. Her camel blazer, impeccably tailored, matched her cool, professional demeanor as she addressed the unnervingly attentive family. Mother and father sat to her immediate right, their faces studies in unwavering agreement, nodding in solemn affirmation at every pronouncement from their golden child. As I was explaining, Valerie continued, her voice clear and precise, Tenant 3B, Mrs. Peterson, is 3 days late on rent again. I prepared an eviction notice. She held up the document, crisp and official, like a trophy of ruthless efficiency. Business is business. The words, once so chilling from her lips, now ignited a spark of righteous anger within me. Mrs. Simmons, my anchor, sat beside me, an unexpected guest I had firmly insisted on bringing. Her quiet, observant presence made my parents visibly uncomfortable. They knew, perhaps instinctively, that she saw through their carefully polished veneer to the subtle rot beneath. I've reviewed Riverside's financial records extensively, Valerie added, her gaze sweeping the room with an air of absolute authority. We're bleeding money on maintenance for these outdated units. Once we clear out the problematic tenants, we can begin upgrading to attract a more reliable, higher-paying clientele. My mother nodded sympathetically, her expression one of profound understanding. It must be difficult making these hard decisions, darling, she cooed, oblivious to the cruel implications of Valerie's words. For years, I would have shrunk in my chair, allowing their words to wash over me, swallowing objections like bitter pills. But something profound had shifted inside me. Knowledge, sharp and precise, had replaced uncertainty, a newfound strength had utterly displaced the familiar grip of fear. Actually, I said, my voice, to my own surprise, clearer and far more resonant than I had expected, cutting through Valerie's monologue like a fine blade. I've reviewed the records myself, with my attorney. The room fell into an abrupt, stunned silence. Valerie's perfect, practiced smile froze on her face, a tableau of suspended disbelief. What attorney, she managed, her voice suddenly thin. Just then, as if perfectly orchestrated by some unseen hand, the doorbell chimed. Perfect timing, a subtle cue transmitted by Mrs. Simmons' text message, sent discreetly under the table moments before. My father frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, and excused himself to answer. When he returned, Lawrence Carver followed behind him, his distinguished silver hair and calm demeanor an imposing presence, a worn leather portfolio tucked confidently under his arm. Recognition, sharp and instantaneous, flashed in my mother's eyes. She knew exactly who he was, and the implications of his presence. This is Lawrence Carver, I announced, my voice steady, imbued with a quiet authority I hadn't known I possessed, legal counsel for Stonebridge Holdings LLC. Valerie's smile vanished completely, replaced by a mask of raw, barely concealed fury. What's going on, Miranda? She demanded, her voice rising in a dangerous crescendo. Carver, unhurried, placed his portfolio on the dining table, its weight thudding softly, and began extracting documents with methodical, almost ceremonial precision. I represent Miss Wells, he stated calmly, his voice resonating with quiet authority. in her capacity as owner and manager of Stonebridge Holdings, which, as you know, purchased Riverside Apartments 3 years ago from the family trust. The room erupted in a confused murmur of whispers and shocked exclamations. My father's face drained of all color, turning ashen, while my mother's paled to the exact shade of her prized bone china, her hand flying to her throat. That's impossible. Valerie stammered, her voice cracking, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the table edge so tightly her knuckles whitened. I would know if the building had been sold. I manage all the assets. Carver, unperturbed, slid the official deed across the polished wood, its legal language irrefutable. Everything was executed legally. Your grandmother, with meticulous foresight, ensured all appropriate filings were made with the county recorder's office, completely above board. This can't be legal. Valerie insisted, her voice rising, verging on a frantic shout. Mother would never. Grandma Eleanor made sure I could protect what matters, I interrupted, meeting Valerie's furious gaze directly, my own eyes holding a newfound, unyielding resolve. The building, the tenants, her legacy. The words were not a threat, but a statement of absolute fact. My cousin Rachel, whose sharp accounting background allowed her to grasp the intricate situation quickly, leaned forward, studying the documents with a keen eye. These look legitimate, she confirmed, her voice hushed. Miranda owns Riverside through an LLC. Which means, Carver added calmly, letting the full weight of the legal implications settle over the stunned room, that any eviction notices or rent increases would require Miss Wells' authorization as the legal owner. And that authorization, I assure you, has not been given. Valerie sank into her chair, her shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly, her perfectly tailored jacket suddenly seeming too large for her diminished frame. Her absolute control over me, over the building, over the entire carefully constructed family narrative, visibly crumbled, dissolving into dust. My father cleared his throat, a small, pathetic sound. There must be some mistake, he mumbled, still clinging to denial. No mistake, Carver replied, his voice firm but not unkind. Just careful, thoughtful planning by Eleanor Wells to ensure her wishes were respected, and her legacy preserved. The family gathering dissolved into utter chaos. My aunts whispered urgently, their heads bent together like conspirators. Uncles frantically checked their phones, as if answers might magically appear on their screens. Cousins, suddenly acutely aware of shifting power dynamics, reassessed family alliances in real time. Through it all, Valerie sat motionless, her face a carefully blank mask, but her legal training, I knew, was already calculating potential counterattacks, mapping out the next phase of her fight. As we drove away later, the night air cool and fresh against my face, Mrs. Simmons squeezed my hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears, tears of relief and triumph. Eleanor would be so proud, dear, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. She always said you had steel in your spine. You just needed to discover it yourself, under pressure. Back at Riverside, word had spread with astonishing speed. Tenants, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and trepidation, began to gather in the lobby. Mr. Garcia from 4 Amperes, ever the host, appeared with a large pitcher of his homemade sangria, its fruity aroma filling the air. The Johnsons arrived with a hearty casserole, still warm from their oven, a gesture of communal support. Even the quiet, reclusive Mr. Watson from the corner apartment, rarely seen outside his door, ventured out to join us. Is it true? Mrs. Peterson asked, her arthritis-gnarled hands clutching mine, her voice a fragile whisper. You own the building now, dear? I've owned it for 3 years, I explained, the words still feeling strange on my tongue, unfamiliar yet deeply true. I just didn't know it. Their collective relief was palpable, a tangible wave washing over me. Years of uncertainty, of unspoken worry, lifted visibly from their stooped shoulders and anxious faces. It was a liberation, a collective sigh of freedom. Valerie told me last month they were converting to luxury condos, Mrs. Johnson confided, her voice hushed with lingering fear. Said we should start looking for other arrangements, that our time here was limited. Mr. Garcia nodded grimly. She denied my maintenance request 3 times, he added, his voice tinged with lingering resentment, and said the building wasn't worth investing in anymore. One by one, they began to share their stories, tales of Valerie's calculated neglect, her subtle intimidation tactics, her dismissive attitude towards their legitimate concerns. Each revelation, each shared story, strengthened my resolve, cementing my commitment to them. Carver observed quietly from the sidelines, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips as he sipped Mr. Garcia's potent sangria. When the spontaneous gathering began to disperse, and the lobby grew quieter, he approached me. "This is just the beginning, Miranda," he cautioned, his voice low. "Eleanor left you more than you know. More than just a building." I watched my neighbors, no longer just tenants but a vibrant, interconnected community, return to their apartments, their steps lighter, their faces brighter. It was the community Grandma Eleanor had spent decades building, nurturing with genuine care. For the first time, I truly understood what she had meant about connection being more valuable, more enduring, than mere power. But as a profound sense of satisfaction settled over me, a nagging thought emerged, a chill in the rising warmth: Valerie wouldn't surrender without a fight. She was calculating her next move, even now, probably on the phone with her high-powered law firm colleagues. Do I push for everything now, riding this exhilarating wave of victory, or do I prepare methodically for the inevitable counterattack? Mrs. Simmons, as always, seemed to read my thoughts, her wisdom a beacon. "Don't rush, dear," she advised, her voice soft but firm. "Eleanor taught me that the best victories come from patience, from strategic waiting. Tonight was just the opening move, the first volley." I nodded, understanding completely. What had happened tonight wasn't an ending. It was, unmistakably, a beginning. I sat at Carver's antique mahogany desk, surrounded by stacks of meticulously organized documents, each folder a testament to days of intense, focused work. 3 days had passed since I had revealed my rightful ownership of Riverside Apartments to my stunned family, watching the mask of shock transform Valerie's usually composed features. The memory brought a flicker of satisfaction, a small, quiet triumph, but I pushed it away. That momentary victory meant nothing, I knew, if I couldn't secure permanent, unassailable protection for my tenants, for my new family. "We need to analyze every potential legal challenge Valerie might mount," Carver said, his voice grave, sliding another formidable-looking folder toward me. "Your sister isn't just an attorney, she's a strategic thinker who won't accept defeat easily. She's a formidable opponent." My fingers traced the embossed LLC stamp on Stonebridge Holdings Incorporation papers, the tangible proof of my legitimacy. "I keep expecting to feel more triumphant," I admitted, my voice tinged with a strange melancholy, "but all I can think about is what comes next. The next battle." Carver's gray eyebrows lifted slightly, a knowing, approving gesture. "That's exactly the right instinct, Miranda. Complacency is how people lose what they've rightfully gained. It's a dangerous indulgence." I spent hours immersed in the intricacies of property management regulations and LLC statutes, taking careful, precise notes in Grandma Eleanor's beautiful leather-bound journal. The familiar, comforting scent of its aged pages, a blend of old paper and Eleanor's faint perfume, grounded me as I meticulously mapped out Valerie's potential countermoves, anticipating her every possible legal maneuver. Each time my mind wandered toward fleeting thoughts of celebration, I forcefully redirected it, focusing instead on preparation, on strategy. "Look at this," I said, pushing a financial statement, heavy with implications, across the desk. "Valerie has been collecting rent under Riverside Management for the past 3 years, even though the property legally belongs to Stonebridge Holdings. The funds were never allocated correctly." Carver adjusted his reading glasses, his expression hardening. "That's not just misleading, Miranda, it's potentially fraudulent. A clear misappropriation of funds." I opened my laptop, the screen a glowing canvas for my meticulous work, and created a detailed spreadsheet to track every single maintenance request that had gone unfulfilled during Valerie's period of unauthorized management. Each ignored leak, each repeatedly postponed repair, each unanswered call became a damning data point in a clear, undeniable pattern of neglect that systematically undermined the building's value while cynically maximizing short-term profit for Valerie. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I told Carver, though a small, honest part of me wondered if that was entirely true, if a measure of vindication wasn't also at play. "I'm doing it because I need to understand exactly what she's done, to protect myself and the tenants from what she might do next. To understand her playbook. Treat this like a business strategy, Miranda, not family drama," Carver advised, his voice firm. "Your grandmother knew the difference, and it served her well. It will serve you well, too." The next morning, Mrs. Simmons arrived at my apartment, her silver hair catching the morning light as she handed me a thick, manila folder, her grip steady and resolute, belying her 72 years. 15 signed statements from tenants, she announced, her voice filled with quiet triumph, documenting maintenance requests that were never addressed, rent increases without proper notice, and Valerie's dismissive, often contemptuous, treatment when they called with concerns. Solid evidence. I added these crucial documents to our already growing evidence collection, a formidable pile of testimony. Did anyone refuse to provide a statement? I asked, always thinking of the community. Only the Davidsons in 3C, she said, her expression thoughtful. They're afraid of retaliation. Still. We'll protect them either way, I promised, my voice firm with conviction. Their safety is paramount. That afternoon, armed with my smartphone, I walked through the building, a silent documentarian, photographing every visible flaw, the water damage staining the laundry room ceiling, the cracked tiles in the lobby that had been ignored for years, the rusty, decaying pipes in the basement that should have been replaced decades ago. Each image was a silent, damning indictment, documenting Valerie's calculated neglect while she continued to collect maintenance fees that, clearly, never went toward actual maintenance. Back in my apartment, I pored over the complex financial records that revealed a pattern more disturbing, more deliberate, than simple neglect. Maintenance funds from Riverside Apartments had been systematically diverted, not simply mismanaged, but consciously siphoned off into an account cryptically labeled management overhead. The transactions, meticulously documented in Eleanor's own vigilant records, showed nearly $83,000 that should have gone directly toward essential building improvements, but had instead vanished, meticulously funneled into Valerie's personal expenses. A clear, undeniable pattern of embezzlement. The doorbell, a sudden, jarring chime, interrupted my grim analysis. When I opened it, my parents stood in the hallway, their expressions a familiar, potent blend of disappointment and thinly veiled concern that instantly transported me back to a childhood of unspoken expectations. "You're tearing this family apart, Miranda," my mother said, her voice laced with a theatrical sorrow, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her pearl earrings, a gift from Valerie, caught the light as she surveyed my document-covered dining table with an unmistakable air of disapproval, as if my work itself was a transgression. "Valerie has always protected us all, held us together." My father nodded, his hands in his pockets, his gaze avoiding mine. "Your sister says you're threatening legal action now. Is that true, Miranda? Against your own sister?" His tone was accusatory. The realization hit me like a splash of cold water. Valerie had been working on them, meticulously spinning a narrative where I was the villain, the instigator, threatening family harmony, rather than the victim protecting what was rightfully mine, and what was rightfully the community's. "Did she mention," I asked quietly, my voice carefully modulated, "that she diverted over $80,000 of maintenance funds for her personal use? Funds meant for the building, for its residents?" My mother's gaze, sharp in critical moments before, slid away, unable to meet mine. "Business is complicated, Miranda," she said, her voice suddenly vague, dismissive. "Valerie understands these things better than than I do," I finished for her, the familiar, stinging words hanging in the air. "That's what you've always believed, isn't it?" No matter what evidence is right in front of you. The accusation was unspoken, but palpable. Something tight and painful constricted in my chest. The crushing understanding that my parents might never truly see the truth, might never acknowledge that their golden child, their shining example, had systematically exploited everyone around her, including them, for her own gain. After they left, their departure marked by a hollow silence and promises to pray I come to my senses, I returned to my spreadsheets with a renewed, almost fierce determination. Losing my family's approval, I realized, still hurt, a deep, old wound, but not nearly as much as surrendering to Valerie's relentless manipulation would. Truth matters more than approval, I whispered to myself, Eleanor's words from years ago finally, profoundly, making perfect sense. I organized another meticulously detailed file of evidence, preparing for the battle I now understood was not just inevitable, but utterly necessary. The following morning, the aroma of dark roast coffee filled Lawrence Carver's wood-paneled office as I sat at his desk, methodically arranging folders into 3 precise, formidable stacks. The left contained the damning financial records exposing Valerie's suspicious transfers. The center held the collected tenant statements, a chorus of voices documenting years of neglected maintenance requests. The right proudly displayed the official ownership documents, irrefutably proving my control of Riverside Apartments through Stonebridge Holdings LLC. How are we looking? Carver asked, entering the room with 2 steaming mugs, his gaze sweeping over my organized battlements. Everything's in place, I said, accepting the mug with a brief, decisive nod. Tenant notices prepared, financial records secured, building improvement plans drafted and ready to implement. My voice, I noted with a quiet satisfaction, sounded far steadier, far more confident, than it had a week ago when Valerie had first appeared at my door with that ominous envelope. Carver settled into his plush leather chair, the material creaking softly beneath his weight, a sound of old comfort and wisdom. Your grandmother would approve, Miranda. This isn't just about keeping an apartment building. It's about honoring a legacy, protecting a community. I ran my finger along the delicate edge of Eleanor's handwritten notes, her elegant script a tangible link to her foresight. Her words detailed every precaution she had taken, every intricate step to protect what truly mattered to her. Valerie thinks this is about money, Miranda. It never was. That's her fundamental, fatal mistake, Carver said, tapping a pen against his legal pad, his eyes keen. She can't fight what she doesn't understand, and she profoundly misunderstands what Eleanor valued. The afternoon sun, now lower in the sky, cast long, contemplative shadows across the office as we continued our painstaking work. Mrs. Simmons called twice, her voice bright and determined, to report her impressive progress in organizing the tenant meeting. Mr. Peterson, with his usual quiet dignity, offered to testify personally about how I had personally fixed his bathroom plumbing when Valerie had callously refused to send a contractor. Even the Johnsons from the 3rd floor, typically reserved, provided detailed written statements about the mysterious management fees that had suspiciously appeared on their rent statements after Valerie had taken over. We're preparing for war, Miranda, not just another skirmish, I told Carver as we meticulously catalogued each piece of evidence. The methodical, focused work, I discovered, calmed me, channeling my anxieties into productive action. Each document, each statement, each photograph represented another brick in the solid foundation of our defense. My phone buzzed, a sharp, insistent vibration. It was Mrs. Simmons. Her name on the screen usually made me smile, a comforting presence, but as I read her message, the smile vanished. Someone from your sister's law firm just served me papers, it read, claiming I'm violating building policy by organizing tenant meetings. The coffee in my mug turned bitter, a sudden, metallic taste. Valerie was targeting Mrs. Simmons now, deliberately striking at my most loyal supporter. Carver read the message over my shoulder, his eyebrows drawing together into a sharp frown. A classic intimidation tactic, Miranda. Target the support system to isolate the primary opponent. It's meant to scare you, and to silence her. My hands clenched into fists, the injustice a hot wave of anger. I should confront Valerie now. This crosses a line. An unacceptable line. That's exactly what she wants, Miranda, Carver warned, his voice firm, unwavering. Every premature confrontation gives her information about your strategy, about your weaknesses. Patience. Remember Eleanor's words. I paced the length of his office, my boots thumping a restless rhythm against the polished hardwood. Mrs. Simmons is 72 years old. She shouldn't have to deal with legal harassment, with this kind of cruelty. The phone rang again. Mrs. Simmons was calling this time. I answered immediately, my voice tight with concern. Don't worry about those papers, dear, she said before I could even speak, her voice calm and steady, carrying the quiet wisdom of someone who had weathered many, far worse storms. Eleanor faced worse from developers trying to buy her out in the 80s. This is merely a nuisance. But you shouldn't have to, I insisted, my worry palpable. She wants you to react emotionally, Miranda, Mrs. Simmons interrupted gently, her voice clear. Don't give her that satisfaction. I've lived through worse than a strongly worded letter from a law firm. I'm fine. I closed my eyes, drawing a deep, calming breath, trying to anchor myself in her resilience. What do you need from me? Nothing yet. Just stick to the plan, dear. Eleanor knew this day would come. She prepared you for it, for exactly this. After hanging up, I turned to find Carver watching me, a look of profound approval in his eyes. Your sister's making a critical mistake, Miranda, he said, his voice thoughtful. She thinks this is about property, about assets. You, thanks to Eleanor, understand it's about people. And that's a battle she can't win. We spent the rest of the afternoon adapting our strategy, refining our approach. If Valerie was willing to target Mrs. Simmons, she might very well go after other vulnerable tenants, using similar intimidation tactics. We drafted protective measures, meticulously outlining safeguards for everyone in the building, particularly the elderly and those on fixed incomes. When the streetlights flickered outside Carver's window, casting long, orange glow, we finally stopped. My back ached from hours hunched over documents. My eyes burned from reading endless lines of fine print. But for the very first time since this entire ordeal had begun, since Valerie had appeared at my door, I felt truly, wholly prepared. We have everything we need, Miranda, Carver said, closing the last folder with a definitive snap. It's time to take control. It's time to act. I gathered my coat, suddenly aware of how much had changed, not just externally, but internally, in just a few short, intense days. The woman who had trembled when Valerie handed her that envelope seemed like a stranger now, a distant memory. This isn't just about me anymore, I said, more to myself than to Carver, the truth resonating deep within me. It never was. Mrs. Simmons was waiting on her porch when I arrived home, a steadfast sentinel. Her silver hair glowed softly under the porch light, a halo of wisdom. Her hands, clasped gently, cradled her favorite teapot, a symbol of domestic peace amidst the storm. Eleanor knew this day would come, she said softly as I climbed the steps, her voice a soothing balm. You're ready. The calm certainty in her voice washed over me, a profound reassurance. The weight of Grandma Eleanor's meticulous preparation, Carver's strategic guidance, and Mrs. Simmons' unwavering, fierce support steadied me like bedrock beneath my feet. On Monday, Valerie would discover, to her profound dismay, what truly happens when silence, carefully cultivated and strategically wielded, finally becomes an unassailable strength. I tapped my pen against the stack of tenant applications, a nervous, rhythmic counterpoint that utterly failed to calm my fraying nerves. The morning sun streamed mercilessly through my apartment windows, highlighting countless dust motes dancing in the air, each tiny particle a reminder of the relentless march of time, of the fleeting peace I'd enjoyed. 3 days of relative quiet since our family confrontation at my parents' home, 3 days of tentatively believing I had finally seized control of my life, of Riverside. My phone vibrated against the coffee table, a jarring intrusion. Carver's name flashed across the screen. My stomach tightened, a cold knot of apprehension, as I answered. Miranda, his voice carried a tension I hadn't heard before, a strained urgency. Valerie just filed an emergency motion with the county court. The words were like a physical blow. She's challenging the LLC formation, claiming Eleanor was mentally compromised when she transferred ownership. My coffee turned immediately bitter on my tongue, its familiar warmth replaced by a metallic taste of dread. That's absurd. Grandma was sharp, clear-headed until the very end. She meticulously planned everything. It's a sophisticated strategy, Carver explained, his voice low and tactical. She's questioning Eleanor's mental capacity during the exact period when the crucial paperwork was filed. If the judge grants even temporary relief, Miranda, you could lose control of everything while this drags through the courts. It could take months, years. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass, seeking solace in the indifferent pain. How bad is this, Lawrence? The Register printed an interview with her this morning. Front page, he stated, his voice filled with barely suppressed disgust. She's portraying herself as the ultimate victim, claiming she's only trying to protect the family assets from Eleanor's misguided decision. A masterclass in manipulation. I closed my eyes, a familiar, painful dread washing over me. Let me guess. Mom and Dad are backing her up, offering their full support? Front page photo of all three of them looking appropriately concerned, Miranda, Carver confirmed, his tone clipped. Your father was quoted saying they just want what's best for both our daughters. A perfectly crafted, infuriating soundbite. He paused, then continued, his voice hardening. Valerie scheduled a press conference for tomorrow afternoon to explain the situation to the community. She's playing the public sympathy card. The familiar, frantic rhythm of my heart beating too fast began again, a relentless drumbeat against my ribs. Breathe in. Breathe out. What happens next, legally? Judge Harmon, an experienced but no-nonsense judge, scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Sharp. Everything we've meticulously built, Miranda, could be undone with a single ruling. Prepare yourself. I grabbed my laptop, my hands shaking slightly as I opened my email. The court notice sat at the top of my inbox, its legal language cold, formal, and utterly merciless. Valerie called me last night, I confessed to Carver, the memory still raw. Said she's protected this family for years while I did nothing. Said it was time I stopped playing games. This isn't a game, Miranda, Carver said, his voice resonating with conviction. It's a desperate move from someone who's realized she's vulnerable, who's facing genuine consequences for the first time. A knock at my door interrupted us. I peered through the peephole to find my parents standing in the hallway, their expressions a familiar, potent blend of disappointment and concern that instantly transported me back to childhood. I need to go, I told Carver, my voice tight. My parents are here. They always know when to make an appearance. Remember, he said quickly, urgently, before I could hang up, everything we prepared for is happening now. Stay focused. Do not waver. I took a deep, fortifying breath and opened the door. Miranda, my father said, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside, his presence filling the small space. His voice, laden with a stern disapproval I'd known since childhood, brooked no argument. My mother followed, her eyes, quick and appraising, scanning my living room with the familiar mix of judgment and disappointment. This has gone far enough. What has, Dad? I asked, keeping my voice deliberately steady, refusing to rise to their bait. This childish rebellion, my mother declared, her voice filled with an almost theatrical exasperation. Valerie has managed the family properties for years. She knows what she's doing. Just let your sister handle it. She always has. The words stung, a familiar dismissal of my capabilities, a reinforcement of Valerie's perceived superiority. I noticed my father's gaze lingering, then fixing, on the open folder on my coffee table, provocatively labeled Riverside Financial Records 2020 to 2024. His eyes narrowed slightly. Several neighbors stopped me at the grocery store yesterday, my mother added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. They're questioning if you're being fair to your sister, if you're being reasonable. Think about how this looks, Miranda, to the community. The implicit threat hung heavy in the air: community pressure, public shaming, the crushing weight of appearances, the same insidious tools they'd used my entire life to control me, to keep me in line. I have an emergency hearing tomorrow morning, I stated, deliberately not engaging with their emotional manipulation. I need to prepare. It's a very serious matter. My father placed his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt strangely heavy, restrictive. His cologne, a blend of cedar and old money, smelled faintly of disappointment. Miranda, be reasonable. Your sister has connections, resources, a powerful firm. This will only end badly for you. You can't win against her. When they finally left, their parting words empty promises to pray I come to my senses, I collapsed onto my couch, the emotional toll of their visit heavy upon me. My phone buzzed again. A message from Mrs. Simmons, come down for tea when you're ready, dear. I heard everything. My windows face the street, you know. 20 minutes later, I was seated at Mrs. Simmons' warm, inviting kitchen table, surrounded by an eclectic collection of photographs of her grandchildren and the comforting, faint scent of cinnamon. She poured tea from her mother's chipped floral pot, its delicate pattern a testament to generations, while I outlined Valerie's latest, desperate legal strategy. Eleanor anticipated this, you know, Mrs. Simmons said, her voice calm and unwavering, as she pushed a plate of buttery shortbread cookies toward me. That's why she had you keep such meticulous, detailed records of every repair, every conversation, every transaction. She saw this coming, Miranda. Carver says we have everything we need, I said, trying to reassure myself as much as her, but Valerie's entire career is built on winning cases like this. She's a formidable litigator. Mrs. Simmons squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I've already called 12 tenants who've lived here more than 5 years. They'll all be at the courthouse tomorrow morning, Miranda, character witnesses for Eleanor's mental state. They will speak for her. My phone lit up with a text from Carver, counter-motion filed. Judge Harmon requested all financial records for the past 48 months, for Riverside and for Valerie's personal accounts. Remember what Eleanor always said, patience wins more than power. Strategy over emotion. I've spent my whole life being patient, I said, setting down my teacup with a clink, a flash of frustration escaping. It hasn't exactly worked out well for me, until now. Mrs. Simmons studied me over her spectacles, her gaze piercing. There's a profound difference, dear, between waiting passively and preparing strategically. Eleanor taught you that difference. That's precisely why she chose you, Miranda, not Valerie, to carry her legacy. By evening, my living room had transformed into a true command central. Carver arrived with several more boxes of financial records and an imposing stack of relevant court precedents. 3 other tenants, courageous and determined, had stopped by with written, notarized statements about their interactions with Eleanor in her final, lucid years, testifying to her sharp mind and unwavering intentions. Valerie will argue undue influence, Carver explained, organizing papers into precise, color-coded stacks, a lawyer's meticulous preparation for battle. She'll claim Eleanor was susceptible to manipulation due to age and isolation. She'll portray you, Miranda, as opportunistic, preying on your ailing grandmother. That's exactly what she is, Mrs. Simmons muttered under her breath, a rare flash of anger in her usually serene demeanor. The judge needs to see the pattern, I said, spreading out a series of maintenance requests spanning 5 years, a damning timeline of neglect. Show how Valerie systematically neglected crucial repairs while brazenly pocketing the funds. Show how Eleanor, in her wisdom, documented absolutely everything, anticipating this very attack. My phone rang again, a familiar, unwelcome sound. My parents. I silenced it without answering, my resolve hardening. There was no room for their manipulative pleas tonight. Tomorrow will determine everything, Carver said, checking his watch, the gravity of the upcoming day palpable. We should review your testimony again, word for word. Leave nothing to chance. Near midnight, long after Carver had gone home to prepare his final arguments, Mrs. Simmons insisted on staying. She sat on my couch, needlework in her hands, the gentle, rhythmic click of her knitting needles a soothing counterpoint to my churning anxiety, a small, domestic sound of defiance. You need sleep, dear, she said gently, her voice soft but firm. Tomorrow, we will show them what real family means, what true legacy entails. I nodded, but instead of heading to my bedroom, I pulled out an old photo album from my bookshelf, its leather cover worn smooth from years of loving handling. I found the picture I was looking for, Eleanor and me on the building rooftop, silhouetted against a breathtaking sunset. I was 12 then, gangly and serious, my hair flying in the breeze. She had her arm protectively around my shoulders, a gesture of unwavering support. I knew even then, Miranda, Mrs. Simmons said, looking over my shoulder, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. Eleanor built this case, piece by meticulous piece, for 3 years before she passed. Every document, every potential witness statement, every single financial record. She knew exactly what Valerie would do, and she prepared for it. I'm not just fighting for myself anymore, I whispered, tracing Eleanor's beloved face in the photograph, the weight of the moment settling deep within me. It's for Mrs. Peterson, who can't afford to move. For Mr. Garcia and his grandson, who rely on affordable housing. For everyone Valerie would discard for profit, for everyone she dismissed as mere numbers. Mrs. Simmons set aside her knitting, her gaze intense. Eleanor always said you understood what mattered most about Riverside, Miranda, that it's not just property, it's people's homes. It's a living, breathing community. I placed the precious photograph on top of my neatly organized court documents, a silent vow. I hope I make you proud tomorrow, Grandma, I murmured, my voice imbued with a quiet, fierce determination. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled against the encroaching darkness, a silent testament to the vast world beyond my apartment. Tomorrow morning, Judge Harmon would hear both sides of this deeply personal, deeply legal battle. Tomorrow, everything changes, one way or another. I took a deep, fortifying breath and began reviewing my testimony, one last time, preparing to speak my truth. The following morning, a profound stillness settled over the courtroom, thick with anticipation. I gripped the edge of the polished wooden table, my knuckles turning white with suppressed emotion, as Judge Harmon adjusted her severe wire-rimmed glasses, her gaze sweeping the assembly. Every single seat was filled, a sea of familiar faces from Riverside Apartments, Mrs. Peterson, her arthritis-gnarled hands resting on her cane, a picture of quiet defiance, the Johnsons, their hands clasped tightly in the third row, their expressions a mix of fear and fervent hope, Mr. Garcia, his weathered face set in grim determination. They were here for me, for Eleanor, for their homes. Valerie sat across the aisle, spine rigidly straight in her impeccably tailored charcoal suit, an image of cold, professional composure. Her attorney, James Preston, from her firm's formidable litigation department, shuffled papers with practiced, almost dismissive efficiency. My parents occupied the row directly behind Valerie, my father's arm draped protectively around my mother's shoulders. They hadn't looked at me once since I'd entered the courtroom, their loyalty visibly solidified with Valerie. Mrs. Simmons, sensing my mounting tension, reached over and gently patted my hand, a silent, grounding gesture. Breathe, dear, she whispered, her voice a soft anchor. Lawrence Carver, my steadfast counsel, arranged his notes methodically beside me, his movements deliberate, unhurried. Remember what we discussed, Miranda, he murmured, his voice low and firm. Let the evidence speak. Let Eleanor speak. The bailiff called the court to order, the sharp pronouncement echoing in the tense silence, and Judge Harmon began. This is an emergency hearing regarding ownership and management rights of Riverside Apartments. I understand there are time-sensitive matters at stake, with significant implications for many residents. Valerie's attorney, James Preston, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficacy preceded him, stood. His voice, measured, authoritative, and imbued with an almost theatrical gravitas, filled the courtroom. Your Honor, he began, we contend that Stonebridge Holdings LLC was formed under highly questionable circumstances. Mrs. Eleanor Wells was 82 years of age, suffering from declining health, and quite frankly, experiencing significant cognitive impairment when these documents were purportedly executed. We have medical records indicating she was taking prescription medications that could, and often did, severely impair her judgment. He presented a stack of official-looking documents to the court with a flourish, as if unveiling an irrefutable truth. Furthermore, Miranda Wells, as the alleged manager, has limited business experience and absolutely no legal training. Her grandmother was clearly subject to undue influence during a particularly vulnerable period, susceptible to manipulation. My stomach knotted, a cold, sickening coil. They were attacking Grandma Eleanor's mental capacity, questioning her clarity, her judgment, something so precious, so integral to her identity. I breathed slowly, consciously, forcing myself to remember Eleanor's voice, her quiet wisdom. Patience outlasts power. The truth will always prevail. Preston continued, his voice unwavering. The Wells family has managed these properties for decades, with a proven track record of astute business acumen. Valerie Wells Harrison, in particular, possesses the professional expertise and strategic vision necessary to maximize returns for all concerned parties, ensuring the long-term financial security of the family trust. My father nodded emphatically behind Valerie, his approval palpable. My mother, her face etched with manufactured distress, dabbed at her eyes with a delicate tissue. Financial records, Preston asserted, clearly indicate Mrs. Wells Harrison has increased property values by an impressive 23% through her professional, diligent management. This last-minute, audacious claim by Miranda Wells, a novice, directly threatens the financial security of the entire family and the proper management of a significant asset. Judge Harmon, her expression unreadable, turned her gaze to Carver. Your response, counselor. Carver rose slowly, deliberately, his movements measured, almost ponderous, but his voice, when he spoke, remained commanding, infused with quiet power. Your Honor, I served as Eleanor Wells' personal attorney for 34 years. I was not only present, but actively involved, when Stonebridge Holdings was formed, and when Eleanor Wells transferred ownership of Riverside Apartments to that LLC. He lifted a video tablet, its screen dark, and held it up. Rather than have me simply tell you about Eleanor's mental capacity, Your Honor, I believe it would be far more compelling to allow her to speak for herself, from her own words, with her own clarity. The courtroom stilled, a profound silence falling as Carver connected the tablet to the large display screen visible to everyone. Eleanor's face, vibrant and resolute, appeared on the screen, seated comfortably in her own living room, a date stamp clearly showing the recording was made precisely 3 weeks before she passed away. I, Eleanor Marie Wells, her voice, though softer than in her prime, carried the same unmistakable clarity, the same unwavering purpose I always remembered, being of sound mind and body, and fully aware of my actions, make this statement freely and without coercion, under no duress. She adjusted her glasses, a familiar, almost identical gesture to Judge Harmon's earlier one. I wish to explain my decision regarding Riverside Apartments. A tear, despite my fierce determination to remain composed, escaped and traced a warm path down my cheek. Mrs. Simmons, ever watchful, squeezed my hand, a silent offering of strength. Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. I built this property 52 years ago with my late husband, Charles. For decades, it has proudly provided safe, affordable homes for working families and seniors on fixed incomes. My granddaughter, Miranda, has demonstrated not only the dedication but also the profound commitment and compassion necessary to continue this vital legacy. Her gaze, direct and unwavering, met the camera. I am therefore transferring legal ownership to Stonebridge Holdings LLC, which Miranda will personally manage. I do this with full, absolute awareness of my actions and their consequences, and with complete confidence in Miranda. The video continued, Eleanor calmly and articulately answering questions from Carver about the precise details of her decision, her answers lucid, detailed, and utterly unambiguous. When the recording finally ended, the courtroom remained in stunned silence, the profound weight of Eleanor's words hanging in the air. Carver then produced a thick, meticulously organized binder. We have extensive documentation of Eleanor Wells' medical evaluations, Your Honor, showing her cognitive functions remained excellent, fully intact, until her very passing. Her personal physician, Dr. Martha Coleman, a highly respected geriatric specialist, is present in court to testify if needed. He then turned to another crucial exhibit, a damning counterpoint. We also have comprehensive, meticulously kept records of building management under Valerie Wells Harrison for the past 3 years. Financial statements, Your Honor, clearly show that $83,000 earmarked specifically for essential building maintenance was systematically diverted to other, undisclosed accounts, bypassing its intended purpose. A low murmur, a ripple of shocked whispers, swept through the courtroom. Valerie shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her composure visibly fracturing. These documents, Carver continued, his voice rising with quiet force, sliding yet another formidable folder toward the judge, show critical repairs repeatedly postponed, even outright ignored, despite numerous tenant complaints, documented in detail. Mrs. Ruth Simmons, a long-term resident and a pillar of this community, has personally collected and compiled sworn statements from 17 tenants regarding the rapidly deteriorating conditions under Mrs. Wells Harrison's negligent management. Mrs. Simmons, with a quiet, powerful dignity, rose, clutching a folder of her own, her back straight. At 72, she stood with a surprising strength, a testament to her unwavering spirit. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and resonant, I've lived at Riverside for 40 years. I knew Eleanor Wells not only as my landlord but as a dear, cherished friend. She trusted Miranda to preserve affordable housing for families and seniors, to uphold her true vision. Under Valerie's management, Your Honor, our heat failed twice last winter, leaving vulnerable residents in bitter cold. 3 elderly tenants, including one with severe asthma, developed respiratory infections directly attributable to the lack of proper heating and neglected conditions. Valerie, her face now a mask of barely contained fury, whispered urgently to Preston, who looked increasingly uncomfortable, sensing the tide turning decisively against his client. Judge Harmon, her expression still unreadable, meticulously reviewed the documents, her eyes moving deliberately from page to page. I'd like to hear from Miss Wells directly, she stated, her voice firm. My pulse quickened, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, as I stood. The walk to the witness stand felt interminable, each step heavy with the weight of expectation. After I was sworn in, my hand steady on the Bible, the judge looked at me directly. Miss Wells, why do you believe you should maintain control of Riverside Apartments? I looked at Valerie, then at my parents, their faces still averted, before turning back to the judge, my gaze clear and resolute. I'm not trying to punish anyone, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady, filled with conviction. I'm simply trying to protect what my grandmother meticulously built. Riverside isn't just an asset to be maximized for profit. It's a vibrant community where people have lived for decades, raised their families, grown old with dignity. It's their home. Miss Wells Harrison claims you lack the business acumen to manage such a significant property effectively, the judge noted, testing my resolve. I've been managing it for 5 years, Your Honor, I replied, my voice unwavering. First assisting my grandmother, learning from her, then running the daily operations while Valerie exclusively handled the financial matters. The tenants know me. I know which radiator knocks in winter and which doors stick in summer humidity. I know their names, their stories, their needs. I am invested in their well-being, not just the bottom line. The questioning continued for nearly an hour. Preston, skillful and relentless, cross-examined me about complex financial matters, trying to expose gaps in my knowledge, to portray me as an amateur. But Grandma Eleanor and Carver had prepared me meticulously, foreseeing every possible attack. For each question, I had records, precise figures, and carefully formulated plans ready, my answers clear and confident. When testimony concluded, Judge Harmon called for closing arguments. Preston, still attempting to salvage a shred of victory, emphasized Valerie's professional qualifications and the family's long-standing financial interests. Carver countered, calmly but powerfully, with Eleanor's crystal-clear intentions, her unwavering vision, and the irrefutable documentation of Valerie's egregious mismanagement and neglect. The courtroom fell into a profound, heavy silence as Judge Harmon reviewed her copious notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. Valerie maintained her composed expression, a rigid mask, but her fingers tapped rhythmically against her leather portfolio, a nervous habit from childhood, a subtle crack in her perfect facade. Finally, Judge Harmon looked up, her gaze steady, having weighed all the evidence presented. I find, unequivocally, that the formation of Stonebridge Holdings LLC and the subsequent property transfer were executed properly by Eleanor Wells, while she was fully competent and of sound mind to make such decisions. A soft, collective exhale of relief escaped from Mrs. Simmons and the tenants beside me. Furthermore, the financial records presented demonstrate management practices that are, at best, professionally questionable, and at worst, a deliberate misappropriation of funds. The judge's gaze settled briefly, pointedly, on Valerie, a silent, damning indictment. This court, therefore, upholds Miranda Wells' ownership and management rights to Riverside Apartments through Stonebridge Holdings LLC. Relief flooded through me, warm and overwhelming, leaving me momentarily lightheaded. Carver, ever the steady presence, placed a firm, steadying hand on my shoulder. Additionally, Judge Harmon continued, her voice gaining an additional layer of authority, the court orders a full and comprehensive accounting of all Riverside Apartments finances during Valerie Wells Harrison's management period, specifically from the date of transfer to Stonebridge Holdings LLC. Any misappropriated maintenance funds, as documented in evidence, must be repaid to Stonebridge Holdings within 60 days. Any further interference with Stonebridge Holdings operations, or any attempt to obstruct this accounting, will result in immediate, severe additional sanctions, including professional censure and potentially criminal charges. Valerie's composure, so fiercely maintained, finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped slightly, though she maintained her rigid posture, her face now a carefully blank mask designed to hide the profound sting of defeat. This matter is decided. The gavel struck, a sharp, resounding clap that echoed through the courtroom with absolute finality. The sound reverberated through the courtroom, through my chest, a triumphant bell tolling for Eleanor's legacy. "Thank you, Your Honor," I managed, my voice steady, despite the overwhelming surge of emotion swelling inside me. As people began to rise, a distinguished gentleman in a dark suit approached Preston, handing him a discreet business card. I caught the words, Bar Association, before Carver gently guided me toward the exit, away from the lingering legal fallout. Mrs. Simmons embraced me, her eyes bright with unshed tears of joy and pride. "She's watching over you, dear. Eleanor would be so proud. You honored her." Tenants, their faces beaming with relief and gratitude, surrounded us, offering heartfelt congratulations. Mr. Garcia pumped my hand enthusiastically, his grip surprisingly strong. Mrs. Peterson tapped her cane on the floor in a rhythmic, joyful approval, a small dance of victory. "All these years of meticulous documentation just paid off, Miranda," Carver said, satisfaction evident in his voice, a quiet triumph for his unwavering faith in Eleanor. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing. She played a long game, and she won. I turned to see my parents standing awkwardly at the periphery of the celebration, their faces a mixture of confusion, dismay, and perhaps a flicker of shame. My mother's expression wavered between bewilderment and profound sadness. My father stared intently at the floor, avoiding all eye contact. Valerie, her face a carefully constructed blank, conferred in hushed tones with Preston, already, I knew, calculating her next, desperate move. For a moment, a fleeting impulse, I considered approaching them, offering words of reconciliation, a bridge. Instead, I turned back to the vibrant community gathered around me, the people who had trusted me, supported me, believed in me when my own family wouldn't. This was never about revenge, I told Mrs. Simmons quietly, her understanding gaze meeting mine. It was about the truth. And about them. She nodded, a profound understanding in her eyes. The truth, dear, always has a way of setting everything right in the end. Outside the courthouse, the oppressive clouds that had threatened rain all morning finally parted, and glorious sunshine broke through. The light felt symbolic, warming my face, a gentle benediction as I descended the steps with my real family, the one Grandma Eleanor, with her profound foresight and unwavering love, had helped me find. I stood in the newly renovated community room of Riverside Apartments, a space now bathed in the gentle glow of fresh paint and renewed hope, watching Mrs. Simmons meticulously arrange a vibrant bouquet of flowers on the buffet table. The morning light streamed generously through new, energy-efficient windows, highlighting the warm sandstone walls, a testament to months of diligent work. 6 months since that pivotal court victory, and sometimes, even now, I still woke up expecting to find it was all a vivid dream, a fleeting illusion. "Miranda, dear, where do you want the punch bowl to go?" asked Mrs. Simmons, now officially our indispensable resident liaison, her silver hair catching the light as she turned, her eyes twinkling. "Next to the cookies, please, Mrs. Simmons," I answered, my voice calm and assured, as I adjusted the commemorative plaque we were unveiling today. My fingers traced the elegantly engraved words, Eleanor Wells Community Room, where neighbors become family. A fitting tribute. Mr. Garcia from 3B entered, his weathered face beaming, carefully carrying a homemade cake, its aroma of vanilla and sugar filling the air. "Just like I promised, Miss Miranda," he announced proudly. "My mother's recipe, to celebrate our new, perfectly working heating system." My phone buzzed with an incoming message. Lawrence Carver, now the permanent, trusted legal counsel for Stonebridge Holdings, a steadfast ally. The court denied Valerie's final, desperate appeal, his text read. "Congratulations, Miranda. This chapter, officially and unequivocally, is closed." A profound weight, one I hadn't realized I was still carrying, lifted from my shoulders, an immense sense of finality and peace. Valerie's law firm, facing public scrutiny after the trial revealed her egregious financial manipulations, had placed her on indefinite leave. Last I heard, she had reluctantly taken a position at a smaller, less prestigious firm across town, a significant fall from grace. The phone rang again. My parents. After months of awkward, hesitant conversations, their initial shock and anger slowly giving way to a reluctant acknowledgement of the truth, they had begun to reach out, tentative steps toward reconciliation. "We're running a little late, darling," my mother said, her voice carrying that new, unfamiliar hesitancy, a cautious politeness that had replaced her old imperiousness. "Your father insisted on bringing those photo albums you asked about. He thinks you'd like them for the community room." As I set down the phone, Mrs. Simmons appeared at my elbow, her gaze perceptive. "You never truly wanted to fight, did you, Miranda?" she observed quietly, her wisdom piercing. "You just wanted fairness. Justice." "I never thought I'd actually win," I admitted, straightening a stack of brochures for our new tenant assistance program, a testament to our new ethos. She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with a deep, knowing understanding. "Eleanor knew you would, dear. That's why she left you everything you needed. Not just money, but a purpose. A vision." I nodded, remembering Grandma's whispered words from so many years ago, "Your sister seeks power. You seek connection. Remember which one builds a lasting legacy." The morning sun shifted, its golden rays now fully illuminating the Eleanor Wells Community Room, infusing it with a vibrant warmth. 6 months later, I stood confidently before the contractor team, reviewing the detailed renovation plans for the East Wing. My posture was straight, my voice steady, imbued with a newfound authority as I questioned a proposed materials change, my gaze unwavering. The original specifications clearly call for commercial-grade flooring in the hallways, I said, pointing precisely to the blueprints. This alternative, while cheaper, simply won't hold up to the daily traffic of a building this size. It's a false economy. The lead contractor, who had initially addressed his comments, almost instinctively, to my young male assistant, now met my eyes directly, a flicker of respect in his gaze. "You're absolutely right, Miss Wells," he conceded, a hint of genuine admiration in his tone. "We'll stick with the original, higher-grade plan." My apologies. Later that morning, I took my coffee to the small, sun-drenched balcony of my new apartment, the spacious building manager suite where Grandma Eleanor had once lived. From this vantage point, I could see the small, meticulously tended garden where Mrs. Peterson now often chatted happily with a young mother who had just moved in last month, both laughing easily. The waiting list for apartments at Riverside now stretched to 37 names, a testament to our reputation. Despite relentless real estate pressure, I had proudly maintained rents at affordable levels while steadily improving every aspect of the building, transforming it into a desirable home. My phone rang. It was Marissa, a bright, eager young property manager who had been shadowing me for several months, learning the ropes. "The bank approved the Hawkins family for the flexible payment plan, just like you suggested, Miss Wells," she reported, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "Excellent, Marissa," I replied, a smile touching my lips. "Remember what I told you?" "A building is bricks, Miss Wells," she finished, her voice echoing my philosophy, "a community is people. Always put the people first." In the afternoon, Mrs. Simmons found me reviewing applications for our newly established housing assistance program, her presence a comforting, familiar anchor. "You're not just maintaining a building anymore, Miranda," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, her gaze warm. "You're building a home, creating a legacy. Eleanor would be profoundly proud of you." Through my window, I spotted Valerie's sleek, expensive car pulling up to the curb, a flash of familiar luxury. Her designer clothes were replaced with something more subdued, her posture less commanding, less arrogant. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, a fleeting moment of recognition, before she continued slowly down the street, a ghost of her former self. Perhaps there was a lesson learned, a softening, in that quiet glance. The seasons turned, bringing us to one full year after the resounding court victory. I sat across from Thomas Jenkins, a widower whose shoulders were slumped with the crushing weight of impending homelessness after medical bills had tragically depleted his meager savings. "My landlord says business is business," he explained, his voice hollow, his eyes filled with despair. The phrase, so casually cruel, triggered a sharp, painful memory, Valerie delivering my eviction notice with those exact, brutal words. I studied his modest pension, which barely covered his essential needs. "Riverside has a flexible payment plan for residents in transition, Mr. Jenkins," I told him, my voice gentle but firm with conviction. "We can work with your current income and adjust it as your situation improves. We won't let you fall through the cracks." Hope, fragile but undeniable, flickered across his face, rekindling a spark in his weary eyes. "I don't understand," he stammered, almost disbelieving. "Every other place turned me away. They just said there was nothing they could do." "Riverside operates differently, Mr. Jenkins," I explained, leaning forward, my gaze earnest. "My grandmother taught me that property isn't just an asset on a balance sheet. It's a foundation for lives, a place for dignity." That evening, during our monthly community gathering, the Eleanor Wells community room buzzed with a vibrant, joyful energy. I watched 3 families, who might otherwise have been homeless, share a delicious meal, their laughter filling the air. The Eleanor Wells Community Fund, now skillfully directed by Mrs. Simmons, had helped 17 households find stable, dignified housing this year alone. Property owners from neighboring buildings, intrigued by our compassionate, sustainable model, mingled with tenants, exchanging ideas and stories. Your grandmother's vision is spreading, Miranda, Mrs. Simmons whispered, a profound satisfaction in her voice. Compassionate housing with dignity. It's a revolution. My parents stood tentatively near the dessert table, gingerly engaging with tenants they'd once summarily dismissed, their smiles a little strained, a little forced, but present nonetheless. Our relationship, though still formal and tinged with the ghosts of past hurts, had softened, the rigid silence between us finally thawing into something that might, with time, with effort, eventually heal. As the gathering began to wind down, I climbed to the rooftop garden, a peaceful sanctuary bathed in the soft, fading light of dusk. The sunset painted the neighborhood in breathtaking hues of amber and rose, highlighting the myriad small improvements that had, brick by brick, transformed Riverside into a true haven. Grandma Eleanor's voice, a gentle, wise whisper, seemed to drift on the evening breeze. Power without compassion, Miranda, is just control. And control, by itself, is empty. I took a deep, fortifying breath, at peace with my choices, at peace with my path. When people show you who they are, believe them, yes, but also, always, leave room for them to become better. That, I understood now, was the true legacy Grandma Eleanor had left me, more valuable, more enduring, than any property deed or financial empire. It was a legacy built on connection, on community, on compassion, a legacy that would continue to flourish for generations to come.